Hey there, startup founders and early employees. This is George Soto from Sales for Startups. I could have it all if only you were here. Hey there, startup founders and early salespeople. This is George Soto with Sales for Startups. Today we're speaking with Ben Katt, who's the author of When Buyers Say No, based out in Florida. Ben, how are you doing?
Doing great, George. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. As you can see here, I am sitting outside of a startup named, actually, I'll show you the shirt, Spiderbook. So these guys are building a really cool system that goes out, crawls the web and different data sources, and they will deliver a salesperson in their inbox like highly qualified leads. So it's really cool stuff. So I'm hanging out. I'm on their board here. So really appreciate your time. It's actually nice out here in San Francisco. It's usually a little cold, so it's not Florida for by any means.
It's nighttime here, so I mean, you got sunshine. That's great.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into sales? I know you have many years of experience.
Well, I do have lots of experience, and started in high school, and I started telephone sales, and I went to in-home sales. I've done corporate sales and business-to-business sales for years. I had my own publishing company, which I started, and did that for many years. And during my 20s, that publishing company was my ticket to travel the country. I mean, really the world. So it was a very exciting time, and got to work with, meet a lot of great people, and finally sold that before I started in the corporate sales there. But that's been my background, and through that process, I had the chance to start to think about how does persuasion really work. About 20 years ago, I mean a long time ago, I started playing with this idea of, can I map out exactly how this works? And I got maybe halfway through it and kind of let it go, but a few years later I picked it up again and finished what has become the world's first complete persuasion model, which is useful for salespeople. It's useful for managers as they're trying to persuade their employees to their new corporate culture, and useful especially for entrepreneurs, startups who are doing a lot of negotiation in every different direction all at once.
So you spent a lot of time really thinking about persuasion, which I think is fantastic. You and I, we were in Miami speaking at a startup incubator, and I really loved the concepts behind your book. How did you kind of come up with these concepts overall? And maybe you could share some of the concept behind When Buyers Say No.
Well, it's basically the concept comes from this. There's two halves to a persuasion process. Like when you're talking with a customer or client that you want to become involved in your startup, the first part of your conversation is you pretty much know where you are at all times. You establish some rapport with them, you make some small talk, you maybe ask a few questions to identify needs, you present your solutions, you ask them to take action. And so during that first part of the conversation, you pretty much know where you are at all times. Where people start to become lost in the sale is what happens if that prospective client or prospective customer does not say yes right away. Then that's when people start, funny things start to happen. People start to speak more loudly. They say the same things over and over again with more, gestures, like it's going to somehow, fool them. And so that's where it came from, is how do we give you a pattern to know where you are in the persuasion process. And let me just give you a quick clue here. There's only 3 basic activities that you're doing during the entire persuasion process, from start to finish. 3 activities, and that is you're making statements, which is what most beginning salespeople think that sales is all about. It's asking questions, number 2. And the third is remaining silent. Silence is a powerful persuasive tool at certain points during the persuasion topic. And so that's what the whole circle of persuasion is about, is knowing when to do each one of those 3 activities.
Can you dive in? I love the idea of silence, just because I know I love to talk, and a lot of the time, I'll be in a sales conversation or sales meeting, and I'll just talk and talk and talk and talk, even on these Sales for Startup videos. Can you dive in a little bit about into the power of silence and some of the things that you've seen around that concept?
Sure. And it comes from this basic idea of these three activities. The best persuasive business professionals are people who are good at asking questions rather than making statements. Now, we do have to make statements to give them the information they need to make a decision. So because asking questions allows you to learn from this prospective client, this prospective customer, the information that you need so that you're able to present to them the information that's going to allow them to make an informed, productive, good decision to buy your product or services. So one time in particular, when it's really important for you to remain silent, is just after you've asked them to take action. So you've completed your presentation, they have all the information they need to make a decision, and you say, okay, Mr. and Ms. Client, now it's time for you to either sign the dotted line, sign an agreement, make an amendment, or I'm asking you to give me some money. Now, after you've asked them to take action, it's very important for you to remain silent until they then respond. And the reason is, if you don't, you've given them all the information, you've taken them to the point of decision, and now you said, now it's time for you to decide. And a lot of beginning salespeople, a lot of beginning entrepreneurs will then keep talking at that point because silence is a little uncomfortable. But in fact, that uncomfortableness is what that prospective client needs to be able to make a decision. So once you ask a person to buy, to make a decision, to take the next step, remain silent until they then respond. Either they'll say yes, they'll say no, or they'll say maybe. Maybe is a question or an objection that they're going to ask you. But that one point of remaining silent after you ask them to buy, you need to relax. Taking a deep breath. And as calm and relaxed as you are right now, listening to me, that's how calm you should be after you've asked your prospect to be able to take action and to buy. And that's going to see huge results for you in allowing them to make a decision that many times is going to be very profitable and very affirmative.
Fantastic. What is persuasion and negotiation in sales?
Persuasion happens all throughout sales. And it starts from the moment you first meet them and you establish rapport. You're smiling, you're relaxed, you're engaging them in conversation, you're talking at about the same loudness as them, your facial expressions and your movements are about the same as theirs, because people like to do business that are likable. When you ask questions and you listen to what they say, that shows that you care about them. That's persuasive. When you make a presentation that in fact is geared around what the needs they've just expressed to you when you ask questions, that shows that you're caring about them. That's persuasive. So persuasion happens throughout the process. Negotiation is something very important that will happen sometimes after you've asked them to buy. So you've asked them to take action. They're thinking about it. Maybe they're looking around a little bit as they're thinking, and you're staying in silence. And sometimes they're going to make a negotiation request, which means they're going to ask you to change the terms of the sale. Now, an important distinction. When people make an objection, they're saying, look, until you answer this question, I'm not going to do business with you. That's an objection. That's a concern. A negotiation request says, hey, listen, I'm going to try this on for size. If I buy this, would you give me a little bit more time, a little bit more value? Would you change the shipping to me? So a negotiation request says, if I were to buy this. But oftentimes people don't use those words. They just say, can I have an extra widget? Can you give me 6 months extra support? And a lot of times entrepreneurs will go, oh man, they're asking for something else like it's bad news. That's great news. Negotiation request means in their mind they've tried on the idea of buying your product or service. But all they want to do is change the terms just a little bit. So give me a little bit more time or a little bit more value. Can you make it a little bit less money, a little bit less cost, a little bit more value, or change some terms of delivery of service? Those are the three main areas of negotiation. And that's great when you receive a negotiation request, because that means mentally they have just crossed over the fence to your side of the desk and they've said, hey, listen, what if I were to buy this? Could I have a little bit more of that or a little bit more of this?
That's awesome. What tactics would you give an early stage salesperson? So what advice around tactics, just as they're thinking about, hey, we're developing a sales process, we've created a couple prospect lists and have some meetings. Now, how can I take in or apply the concept behind persuasion and negotiation? Just some of those kind of like early baby steps.
Well, there's a couple of things that are very simple that every starter person can do. First is to know what your starting point is on negotiation and know what your ending point is, and to be able to know when it's time after you've discussed all the options to just walk away. Another important point is for you to list on a sheet before you start your appointment with the prospect, all the negotiables that you have. The variables that you can use to negotiate in your favor, things like overnight delivery, an extra month of telephone support, upgrading from regular model to deluxe model. If you make a list of 10, 12 of these items that are variable, then it brings you to this final point, which is this. When a prospective customer asks you for something, they want more value, they want to pay less money, always ask for something in return. The biggest mistake that entrepreneurs and sales professionals make is right away they just give in. So the person says, can you give me a 5% discount? They say, sure, 5%. And then they remain silent. That's the wrong time to remain silent. When they ask you for a negotiation request, that's the time for you to ask something in return. And the question is asking them, look, if you, for instance, there's a couple of very good negotiation requests for you to ask in return. So when they say, can I have an extra 5% discount? You say, great, listen, if you're able to pay today, I will grant you that 5%. If you're able to pay today. And so that's just a great way to be able to say, hey, listen, I will grant you this if you grant me this in return, which is I want you to have more action. Another popular choice that you can use is I want you to put more money down. If you're in a type of a sale or service where they have to put down 20% down, you can say, listen, if you give me 50% down, I will go ahead and give you that extra 2 months of support. So those two factors will make a huge difference for you in getting for you a very successful, very quick negotiation that does the more important, achieves the more important outcome of getting that person to take action right away.
So Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
You know, the persuading other people is one of the great challenges of business. And as you learn the tools of being able to know exactly where you are in the persuasion process, it becomes more and more enjoyable. And professionally, much more satisfying when you're able to quickly move your prospective clients and customers to a buying decision that makes sense for them and allows them to enjoy the value of your product or service. So I wish you the very best in that. And if you have any questions, please write me. You can find me on my website, which is www.circleofpersuasion.com. I'll be happy to answer your questions that you might have about the persuasion process.
Awesome. Ben, thanks again, and I hope to see you shortly.
You too. Thank you for having me on.